Good morning, everyone. We made it back to Cape Town Sunday evening, and yesterday I did something I didn't think I was going to do, but I was busy painting a wall so that I could create a new studio area. But there's something else that I need to report on today, and that is that I was experiencing an earthquake earlier this morning, and I was waiting for the results on USGS, where very soon it said that there was a magnitude 3.5 earthquake 41 kilometers south of Saldanha out at sea, and it was at a depth of 5 kilometers. Now, you will remember I reported on the earthquake that happened out at sea about over 1,000 kilometers south of South Africa, where it was over magnitude 6, and then a short while later we had two earthquakes here in the Cape Town CBD, two separate earthquakes, possibly related, of 2.7 and 2.9. One in the Cape Town CBD and one further out towards Malmesbury, but still in the greater Cape Town area. And last night now a 3.5 on the Richter scale, 41 kilometers south of Saldanha and at a depth of 5 kilometers. Now, we know of the Milnerton fault in this area, and the Milnerton fault specifically would not be part of this specific seismic event. So this could be a different area that could produce seismic events in future. And the big concern is that around this area now we've basically had a triangle of earthquakes, and this triangle of earthquakes out towards Malmesbury, around the Kraaifontein, Brackenfell area, and then further out at sea, just south of Saldanha, or I think 70 odd kilometers north of Cape Town, out at sea. It forms a triangle, and it means that the area is seismically active outside of the greater Milnerton fault, which runs past at sea Koeberg Nuclear Power Station and crosses past Milnerton into Cape Town, and where we've had a fairly large earthquake before. And that earthquake is large enough for us to know that we will have another one in future, and I've spoken about that in the past, and this is why Koeberg Nuclear Power Station was built for a magnitude 7 earthquake, and this is because we expect in future for another big one to strike us. And I want to go to a Business Tech article that came out on the 2nd of October. Remember, the South African Council for Geoscience said at the time that these little earthquakes are normal, or earth tremors. Well, a 3.5 is not a little tremor. What I felt last night was firstly a rumble that I heard, and then shaking. And I mean, the furniture shook, and even some things that was attached to a cupboard fell. So that's not insignificant. And as you should know, the Richter scale is a log scale, so it gets exponentially larger as it increases in size. And I want to quickly look at an article in Business Insider. IOL also covered this, but I see there's nothing in mainstream news this morning about this earthquake when it should be a concern. Cape Town is due another earthquake, an expert says, and it will be a big, expensive one. And I fully agree with the sentiment, because you know, developers, people that are unscrupulous, they don't care about how they construct properties. They certainly don't construct it for the size earthquake that we are due in Cape Town. And the headline here reads, it's only a question of when another earthquake will hit Cape Town, an expert says, and when it does, it will be a big one. And I have to fully agree, studying the history of earthquakes in the past extensively, because I worked at Koeberg Nuclear Power Station, and looking at the Tulbagh earthquake as well as the massive Milnerton earthquake we had before. And it says here, and when it does, it will be a big one. That likely quake could cost Cape Town about 10 billion in property damage, of which a big portion could be at the Greenpoint Stadium. And then it reads, Cape Town is likely to experience another major earthquake sooner or later, and recent seismic activity in the vicinity of the city could be an indicator of rising tectonic stresses. Now remember, this article was written before this earthquake occurred, so I would like to hear this expert's opinion. That's the view of Professor Andrzej Kajko, director of the University of Pretoria's Natural Hazard Center. The Council for Geoscience says more than 80% of seismic events recorded in South Africa are mining related and occur in areas with significant deep level mining activity, which we all know, such as the Northwest and Northern Cape provinces. However, the Southwestern Cape is one of the regions with the highest level of tectonic origin seismic activity in the country. So if it's going to happen, it's going to happen in the Western Cape, a proper earthquake. In fact, the province has been the site of two of the most devastating earthquakes in South African history, and people tend to forget things like this. This 1969 Tilburg earthquake and the 1809 Milnerton quake, both of which measured around 6.3 on the Richter scale. Now 6.3 on the Richter scale is a lot heavier than what we experienced in the early hours of the morning, which was a 3.5 on the Richter scale. And I quote him, "While we cannot say exactly when an earthquake will occur, what we can say is that once an earthquake happens in a particular area, it will happen again at a similar magnitude," says Kajko. It's only a question of when, and I fully agree with him. The epicenter of the 1809 Milnerton quake is thought to have been near the site of the old Ascot racecourse, where the majority of structural damage occurred, and which lies about 15 kilometers from the Cape Town CBD. While we know that the Rietvlei area collapsed during that earthquake and actually changed the flow of the water of the river that runs through to the Milnerton Lagoon and out to the sea. The origin of the quake was likely due to seismic activity along the Milnerton Fault, which starts about 8 kilometers offshore of the Koeberg Nuclear Power Station and runs in a southeasterly direction beneath Milnerton towards the Cape's Flats. Now, can you imagine what kind of damage this can create, considering it's 15 kilometers, the Milnerton Fault epicenter of the last big quake, 15 km from Cape Town. And I quote, "I'm not very worried about Koeberg, which was very cleverly designed and can withstand a very strong earthquake," says Kajko. "I am worried rather about Cape Town," and I agree with him. Of particular concern is the Cape Town Stadium in Greenpoint. According to a 2014 paper by Kajko, A. Smith and N. van der Koelwyk, it is not clear what calculated seismic load the stadium was designed to withstand. In the same paper titled "A Scenario Approach to Estimate the Maximum Foreseeable Loss for Buildings Due to an Earthquake in Cape Town," provision was made for standard seismic loading of 0.1 G. Nevertheless, the paper found that should a worst case scenario earthquake occur in Milnerton measuring 6.96 on the Richter scale, roughly 19.3% of the stadium would be damaged, a loss that equates to 849 million based on its original construction cost. If a 16.7% of the stadium were damaged, then the losses could amount to 734 million. Of course, building costs have risen since the stadium was first completed in time for the 2010 FIFA World Cup, so actual reconstruction costs would be higher. And I quote, "We did our calculations based on the cost of the whole structure," says Kajko, "by calculating what percentage of the stadium would likely be damaged in the event of an earthquake in Milnerton at a particular magnitude. You can calculate the estimated value of the damage." The paper goes on to say that an earthquake with a magnitude of 6.3 on the Richter scale, as happened before, the same as the estimated magnitude of the 1809 Milnerton quake, could result in an overall loss to the insurance industry of at least 10 billion for insured structures located between 10 to 50 km from the epicenter of the earthquake. So what he's saying here is that you could have damage 50 kilometers away from the epicenter at a magnitude of 6.3, and this is significant. Think about that and remember that in future. And I quote, "Our goal is not to cause panic but to raise awareness amongst people of the seismic risk," says Kajko. Interestingly, Kajko says he believes there may well be a link between the 6.2 magnitude earthquake I mentioned earlier, detected on Saturday 26th of September in Cape Town, which originated 1,600 kilometers offshore, and the subsequent 2.5 and 2.9 magnitude quakes that occurred later that weekend. This differs from the stance by the Council for Geoscience, which stated that the seismic events were unrelated. Well, they're talking nonsense. They have political motives for saying that, and all they've been saying up until now is that we don't expect any large earthquake. They don't know what they're talking about because they need to look at the stresses on something like the Militant Fault that moves over time, and if it doesn't move, it builds up tension. So if the Militant Fault starts to release tension, that'll be of great help, especially if it's small scale. But if it doesn't, like it hasn't for so long now, in fact over 200 years, when that fault slips, it's going to be big. And I have to agree with Keiko on that. Nothing happens without reason, says Keiko. Earthquakes are caused by the presence of stresses. It is very likely that the magnitude 6.2 event triggered the subsequent events that were felt in Cape Town. And what it's done now is revealed 3 other places that are possible sites for earthquakes in future. In this case, they mentioned a 2.5, a 2.9, and now we've experienced a 3.5 magnitude earthquake. And I would like to actually see the reports from the South African Council for Geoscience, and I want them to explain this away, because I went to the USGS website and actually had a good look at the reports, and people reported shaking everywhere. I even sent in a report. So if you actually go and look at these reports, then you will see that it was widely felt, even as far as Tulbagh, I heard. So I mean, that is a significant distance away, but if you look at the radius from which the earthquake came, that makes perfect sense. So I really want you to think about that. There will be a large earthquake in the Cape Town area in future. It should be around a 6.3 on the Richter scale, and with that will come some damage, especially if it's close to the CBD. So don't let any politician fool you. Even the estate agents that really don't care about your health and safety, they just want to make money. They will go and build properties that cannot withstand that. Think about that. Thank you very much. Till the next video.